Welcome, everyone. Give me a little moment to transition myself. Welcome. Our next speaker will be talking about the age of Web3 startups. His name is David Taylor. He's a token architect at NextEarth, and he's passionate about challenging the way that startups are built. So we'd love to hear more about that. Welcome, David, to the stage. Give him a round of applause, everyone.
Very close to the closing party, so I'm going to try to make it worth for your time, because I'm pretty sure that in this heat, everybody is looking forward to that. A bit more than talking about economics and business and deep stuff, but trust me, it's going to be worth it. My name is David Taylor. I'm the token architect at NextEarth, and I'm here to talk to you, to guide you into the age of Web3. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce you to NextEarth as well, because I've been talking to the organizers here, and it turns out that we are the only metaverse company here. So, talk about the first bird, right? It's a challenge, but it's also an honor, because we're having loads of interesting conversations. And obviously, most of the conversations start with, what's the metaverse? And we don't actually really know that at this moment, which means that this is an industry that is trying to find its footing. It's an industry that is trying to find product market fit. And we have a pretty good grasp on, I believe, we have a pretty good grasp on what that is. NextEarth is an Earth-based metaverse, which means that we created a digital replica of the planet Earth. We divided the planet into 10-meter by 10-meter tiles, created a platform, and put the whole thing on the blockchain, which means that we are bringing the first true land ownership platforms in the metaverse. We're the only Earth-based company on the blockchain that does this. So we have a user named Keon who owns this place on NextEarth. And as we started this roadshow a couple days ago, I was in Dublin. We visited a few pubs. We visited a few event venues, and I was just kept buying all the different lands that we were visiting. And that also brings us to what you can do with NextEarth. And that is the thing that has been, about 250,000 people have been thinking about this for the last 10 months. We launched last August, and within these 10 months, we attracted 250,000 users, generated over, actually, it's now $12 million in revenue. So whoever talks about the bear market in crypto, yeah, maybe don't actually believe everything they say. We also launched our token NXTT, which is currently, I would say that it's overperforming most of the market, which is based on our business strategy and our understanding of what the metaverse should be. So, in the center of the NextEarth metaverse, there is the NextEarth virtual land. On the NextEarth virtual land, you can become a citizen just by owning land. And then your land turns into a productive asset that can use to access different services within the metaverse. A couple months ago, when we were just, in last September, we were talking about how this economy would actually work in the long term. And we had two big drawings on a whiteboard. One said landowners, and the other one said service providers. So we would bring on service providers who provide services to landowners. But we would have never thought that the very first service provider to be on this platform would be such a huge company, which is Vueling, the Spanish airline, who partnered up with us and a third party to become the first commercial airline in the metaverse. Now, I'm pretty sure that you guys have seen a couple of news about opening embassies in the metaverse and doing gaming-like stuff in the metaverse. What I'm talking about is actual economic activity. So our partnership with Vueling looks like that you can actually buy your flight tickets through the metaverse, through the NextEarth platform, follow your journey on the map. And that is possible because we are Earth-based, right? If it's a fantasy video game world, it just doesn't make sense. But the interesting thing is that whenever somebody buys a ticket, let's say from London to Barcelona, then your plane will fly over a bunch of land. And if it does, then the land's owner in NextEarth will get paid for it. In one occasion, in two occasions, it doesn't really make a difference. But Vueling has 35 million passengers a year, and is just one commercial airline. And I think by now you can start like grasping the scale of which this can work, which is why we turned Next Earth into a platform as a service provider, where through our API suite, anybody can join, build their own applications, use our Web3 assets, get access to all the land data that we constantly keep developing and keep upgrading, and build your own businesses on top of that, just like Veiling. But is this just a fad? I think that's one of the most common questions, right? Like metaverse is great, but then it goes up and then it goes down, and Web3 is great, but then it goes up and then it goes down. I was hearing some questions about ETH, which if you're in crypto, you're probably worried about where ETH is going right now. So we were looking at like the big picture, because we think that there is a larger trend at play here that starts with, in Web 2, we were users of the internet. We were passive actors, right? There is this famous saying that if you're not paying for a service, you're not a user, you're a product, like, and we all know Facebook. But with Web3, you get true digital ownership. And with true digital ownership, you go from being a passive user into an active economic agent of yourself. You get to own your assets. You get to own your digital avatar. And that means that you get to have a completely new economic relationship with the businesses that you interact with. So the question is, where does this all come from? So let's start a zooming game. Because if we look at how technology develops over just a couple years, 1-2 years, you will see from economic and technological development what marketers want you to see. The new iPhone came out and it has one more camera. Awesome, buy all the iPhones. Right? That's basically technology over a 1-year time span. But if you keep zooming out, let's say for a 10-year time span, you go from, I don't know if you guys remember, 10 years ago, Facebook was the ultimate undisputed center of social activity on the internet, right? It had monopoly, and 10 years later, we are having our own digital spaces for different environments, for work environments, for leisure, for social activities on your mobile phone. Facebook is losing active users and new social media platforms are popping up, but they all have their own kind of format and use cases. But let's keep zooming out. In the 1950s, let's say, okay, let's not go that far. In the 1990s, you would have static websites, right? They were ugly, they were slow, but you could go on there and just basically get a directory of all the businesses that you could interact with. Fast forward 30 years to the present, and you can watch movies on YouTube and you can stream movies on Netflix. All of these technological developments mean that we spend more and more and more time looking at screens, right? Because what's there to look at a static screen in 1995? But if I can watch my favorite series on Netflix in 2022, I'm probably going to be spending like 9 to 10 hours if I'm binging it. Let's zoom even further. In the 1950s, at the end of a workday, the whole family would gather around the TV, a black and white TV, like huge-ass box. They sit down and they watch the news, and then they start watching a movie, which is a predefined program, and you do whatever you can. It's like it's not your choice, but you're consuming content. Fast forward to the present. During COVID, Travis Scott does a concert in Fortnite with millions of people. Again, technology is becoming more immersive. We're spending more and more of our time in our digital life. In the 1950s, that was about 10%. Ever since we invented the telephone in the late 1800s, humanity has been trying to break down physical boundaries through the use of technologies in order to make human interaction possible across all dimensions. That's the telephone, that's the TV, that's the computer, that's your smartphone, that's VR goggles, that's video games, that's everything. This is the overarching trend, right? But as technology develops, we end up spending more and more time looking at digital screens. From the 50s until the 90s, we went to 10 to 30% because we invented computers. And then we started digitizing all the different companies on the planet, and we started looking at screens all the time. And today, We have smartphones, we have Netflix, we have Fortnite, we have all these interesting things, we have the metaverse. We're spending a lot more than that. So, hands up who spends about 30% of their time looking at a digital screen, whether or not that's your laptop, your mobile phone, or your VR goggle. Keep your hands up if you think you spend more than 50% of your awake time doing that. Okay, if you do that, if you spend more than 50%, and this was like half the audience, the other half, you're still in denial, I'm sorry. Your digital life, your digital identity, your digital data, your digital avatar is becoming more important to you than your physical one, because you earn your money on the internet, you spend your money on the internet, you depend on your digital avatar for your entire existence. You order stuff from Amazon, Deliveroo, you work through digital places, especially people who come to this conference, obviously. If I would take away your access to heating or water, you would solve that easily. But if I take away your internet connectivity, you either get back on it or you don't. But if you don't, then you need to rebuild your entire life from scratch, right? Because everything depends on it. And when everything depends on your digital avatar, the one question you need to ask yourself is, who owns it? Who owns you when you're logged into your computer, when you're logged into your smartphone? An average internet user has 150 different accounts. You own none of the data. Even with GDPR, you own none of the data. You get 0% of the monetization that Zuckerberg is making off of you. Half of your life is not yours. I'm going to let that sink in. Half of your life is not yours. It's theirs. And this is where Web3 can make a difference. And this is where Web3 is making a difference. Because in Web2, you create a company. And then the company creates a product. And then you start selling products to your users. And then you have a monetization strategy, a go-to-market strategy. It's pretty easy. We all know it, right? We all come from this industry. I ran my software as a service company for 5 years. I was right in that industry. In Web3, it's different. Web3 companies do not create products. They create assets that are owned and controlled by the community, by you. It's yours. And then you do whatever you want with it. And my job as a Web3 platform provider is to give you the means to transact between each other. You and you can talk to each other and transact with each other in a secure and a trustful way, so it can scale and it can solve your problems and everybody's problems. But that means that the power dynamic between a Web2 company and the Web3 company is different, because Web2 companies will always aim to become monopolistic. Web3 companies, because they don't own the key productive assets that they're doing through decentralization, our job is not to become a monopoly. Our job is to become interconnected. So let's go through that again. Startup, product, consumer, revenue, profits, exit, VC's happy, you're happy, buy a yacht, start a new business, do it all over again. Everybody knows the drill. You move into Web3 and it becomes a whole lot different, right? Because what happens is that you need to figure out the playground for any Web3 business that you're creating. Be it a metaverse where landowners can interact with service providers as consumers, or be it any other kinds of businesses. Be it a fintech company that tries to make payments work without banks. Still the same thing. I am creating assets and I am creating an economy that's owned by you and not me. I'm only an overpaid janitor. And that is the new kind of way that in the age of Web3 companies are being created. The question is why? And the reason is that Web3 can give you a framework to design for trust at scale. Trust is an interesting thing. We do not trust each other as human beings. I can see a couple of people in this audience who are from my team or from our community. Other than that, I don't know anybody. So I don't trust you. That's just it. And I think you would also not trust me. And if you do, that's probably a mistake. And that's evolutionary, right? Because 100,000 years ago, it paid off not believing that guy that said, oh, there's not a tiger behind that rock, you can go there. Like, he was either right or he was wrong. But if he was wrong, I would be dead. So who survived? All the people that didn't believe that guy. And even now, when I was growing up, my mother would always tell me when I was let alone to walk around in the city that do not talk to strangers, do not trust anybody. That's just how trust works. And that's how trust has always worked in humanity, throughout our history. So what did we do as a society? We created institutions, we created governments, we created companies, we created systems, frameworks that we can trust because we cannot trust each other. Which means that if I want to interact with you, or you, I need to go through an intermediary. I need to go through a trusted third party. And that creates a tax on the entire society because there are costs to running trusted third parties. All that Web3 does is creating what I call programmatic trust. Because through the use of blockchain technology and through the use of decentralization, we can create consensus mechanisms that do not require me to trust you. But we can still do business. We can still transact. And whether or not that transaction is real estate or just a simple transfer of funds or buying some work or selling and buying shares in a company, you name it, there are platforms for that, or there are platforms being built for that. All of them are trying to do the exact same thing. Reduce the sunk costs, the externalities within the economy by making trust cheaper. And when that happens, you get to have hospitality without properties. Airbnb started to do that because Joe, Airbnb's co-founder, has been saying for quite a long time now, actually, that it's always about design for trust. Before Airbnb, it would have been absolutely madness to say that I'm going to go and pay a stranger so I can sleep in their house. Or from the other hand, like, who would want to let a stranger into their house? Say, yeah, come here, like, sleep here. You can also drink all my beer in the fridge, eat my food, do whatever, and then you can go in the morning. And then Airbnb came, and they just changed the whole game, right? Why? Because you didn't trust the stranger, you trusted Airbnb. Web3 creates a revolution in how we are looking at and managing trust. And a big part of that, which is a big part of how Next Earth works, is the revolution of private property. Because an integral part of the metaverse industry and the movement are NFTs. And when I say NFTs, I could probably tell that about 80% of you immediately started thinking of badly drawn JPEGs of fantasy animals that you read that somebody bought for $25 million, and you were both angry, why didn't you do that instead of that guy? And you were also baffled, because how on earth can someone be that stupid to pay $25 million for a fucking JPEG? Am I right? Am I getting close? Yeah, that's how it is. Forget the JPEG. Do you know what you're looking at? You're looking at company registries without the company's house. You're looking at real estate registries without authorities. This is the revolution of private property. I do not need authorities to prove that that is real. And obviously, there are technical challenges around that, and whether or not it's stored in a centralized way or on IPFS, or there are like any other ways of actually getting the certificate, or is it just a certificate? Is it actually the real thing? And this technology solves that. But ultimately, if you figure out how to make ownership work in a decentralized and trustless way, you get to begin a revolution. And that is what we're doing with Next Earth, because that is the reason why we chose the map of the Earth, because everybody understands real estate, everybody understands land. Our job is to figure out all the million kinds of ways that we can attribute data to your land and get all the businesses like Whaling to actually provide you the services you're already buying. Your job? Buy land on Next Earth. Easy. So this is basically the whole notion and the whole philosophy and the whole mission of Web3. Stop thinking in terms of products. Start thinking in terms of economies. Because a Web3 company does not generate sales from selling products. It generates revenue from creating the economy, giving it away, allowing and encouraging people to create transactions between each other so they interact, and then tax it. It's a completely new way of looking at the unit economics of how Web3 companies work. I've been doing this for 7 years. I've done token for about 30 different companies, and it always goes back the exact same thing. But it is very likely that the last token that I was ever involved in fully would be NXTT, because I have never seen a token that is overperforming the entire market while everything is just going down the drain, and we are still at 3x compared to our launch price in January, and holding strong. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'm really open to any questions. Our booth is just right to the media lounge, and we have a very special deal that we just created for the next web conference for investors who want to learn more about our native token NXTT. We have limited 10 offers for people, and you can find us at our booth after the keynote. And the clock says we have 7 minutes left, so we can do some questions and answers. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello. I just had a quick question, and my specific question was, how does Next Earth really differ from other things like, let's say, Second Life? And do you expect to convert a percentage of people who say, let's play Second Life to the Next Earth?
That's a really good question, because the entire metaverse industry is trying to recreate Second Life right now. That's basically, it's in one sentence. And we believe that that's actually a pretty big mistake, because you can create all sorts of like video game environments, 3D environments, VR technologies, but that's not the point. The point is the underlying economic layer, right? Who owns what kind of economic redistribution happens between the players. So we do not want to compete or recreate Second Life or Decentraland or Sandbox. We want to become interoperable with them, which is why Next Earth is a platform as a service provider. We provide our API suite to businesses to integrate, but also to other metaverses. So do you want to use our mathematically proven economic model to have the highest quality and highest impact interactions between users? Integrate that and use that at your will. We're not really keen on the 3D, VR, AR thing. Like, it's obviously important and it happens, but we don't have to be 127th company that starts developing a 3D environment, because there are many others that will do. We just give them the assets so they can do it. Yep. I don't know who has the microphone, so I'm just going to start responding to who's loudest.
Okay. You hear me? Okay, nice. I have a question. It's really, the decentralized platform really sounds like a libertarian dream or something. But I have another question. Are you not afraid of a new digital elite that have more land and have more ownership?
Okay, so I have a short answer and a long answer to that, but I don't think that we have time for the long answer. So yes, we are. We have designed, so as I said, we basically created a simulation of our economy, how it grows, how land ownership grows, how token holders grow, and what's the different kind of power structure between the community members. And we have created sinks and redistribution mechanisms into the game, basically, to enable any newcomer 3 years from now to have the exact same chances of generating revenue and use their productive assets as someone who owns 1 million ties on Next Earth. Like, obviously, you will have a slight advantage if you're a large landowner, but like, it's never going to be that big of a gap because of the redistribution mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your talk. I think around the metaverse is a lot of like hype kind of talk sometimes, and I totally get you when you're talking about like with real estate and like this registration part. But can you explain a bit further the Vueling story and like why would you fly on Next Earth with Vueling digitally? Or did I not get it right?
No, you're flying in real life. You're actually getting on it's the same thing. We're not like reinventing the wheel. It's you buy a ticket, you go at the airport, you board the plane, you fly from London to Barcelona or vice versa. But what's important is that the flight frequency is connected to the virtual land. So whatever is already happening, all that's going to change is a transaction between Vueling and the users and the owners of the metaverse. If a plane flies over your land, you get paid. Obviously, it's like a small amount for one flight and one ticket, but you get paid for it. What happens in the other direction? What happens if Vueling wants to test if they should start a new flight route to Budapest? You have 60,000 people at your disposal who will do market research and user-generated content for free, right? Work to earn. I will be incentivized as a landowner whose new flight path would be intersected with my land. I'm incentivized to help Vueling make that happen. And that is how you just basically, it's about gamification, but with a financial incentive.
Feels like a little far step. Like, why would Vueling want to pay for that? Like, I get like market research, etc. But like just on a conceptual level, why would Vueling want to pay for flying over your piece of metaverse?
Because you don't have to. Like, Vueling does not have to pay that off of their balance sheet, right? They create the third party that we work with. It's a mobility data aggregator player who has their own tokens. So what happens is that you're being paid in their tokens that then you can use for governance votes, and then if you vote, you get paid for participating in real money, actually, in NXTT. So what happens is that I want to participate in the governance on this. I want to earn the right to get more revenue from working in this environment. So I'm incentivized that, and Vueling does not have to pay for that at all. That's when I'm saying decentralized economies. You're not creating products. You're not paying out of your pocket. You're creating the synergistic network effects between the different market players that want to make transactions between each other. Like, you're completely upending the entire economic structure. It's completely new business models.
40 seconds for last question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for the presentation. Not only is it informative, but also very entertaining. A quick question. So you can't sell the Earth on a blockchain twice, right? So
correct.
If you become the kind of monopolist in this area, what would make you different from Facebook, who's also, by the way, creating some economies and users transact with each other. They talk and they tax it in a way of applying advertisement to these conversations, right?
Yeah.
So what would make you as a company different from this huge behemoth that actually controls the internet?
Now we're getting into the depths of it. Okay, so
10 seconds.
7. Okay, so Ownership is decentralized, so we will never own everything. If 7.8 billion people buy land, we will never have anything to do with that. They own that, 1. 2, every single business activity that happens within the Next Earth ecosystem is taxed, but 60% of the tax goes back to a reward pool that goes back to you, landowners. It's like as if 60% of Facebook's revenue would go back to Facebook users. Imagine that. Every single conversation about universal basic income would stop immediately. Facebook could solve it in a week.
I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Thank you to Next Earth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.